Well, welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. We have yet another amazing guest today, Susan Guthrie. Well, I refer to Susan, and she might laugh at this, as you'll soon see in her interview, that she is the diva of online mediation. She set the tone well before our COVID pandemic ever hit us. As we all know, we had to pivot quickly when the COVID was upon us. Working remotely, trying to figure out how do we continue doing business, deliver our services, etc. Susan was way ahead of the game. And because of that, she already was positioned to teach professionals like you and me how to do it effectively and efficiently, using and embracing the technology available. I'm just so delighted to present to you Susan, because not only has she become a friend over our course of engagements together, but she truly is an expert in what she does, and she stays ahead of the game. And so we talked today about, okay, maybe you took a course a couple of years ago from Susan, but it doesn't stop there. What are our ethical responsibilities for how we show up as mediators in delivering the best that we can to our consumers who know that they have choices today? And so we'll talk not only about the online delivery of mediation services, but the hybrid world of delivery, a whole new ballgame. And so it's important that we continue to evolve our skills, our knowledge, awareness, and our expertise to truly build trust, but also demonstrate our efficacy and our ethical behavior in maintaining standards with our practice of mediation. So stay tuned, don't go away. We're going to listen to Susan Guthrie, the online diva of mediation services. I can't wait for you to listen and learn. And by the way, pass it on. Let other people know about the expertise that Susan brings to our world of mediation. Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. I'm Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc. We're here to explore how to unravel some of the intricacies of how our human brains work and how we're impacted by different mediums, different forms, and bringing to you some of the best in thought leaders. So if you like this program, please subscribe so you can pass it on and keep moving it forward. So I'm delighted to have with me today Susan Guthrie, the online diva of mediation in today's world. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Deborah. I don't think I've been called an online diva before. I think I like it.
Well, I think I gave you that moniker a while back, so maybe you didn't hear it properly. So I'll say it again, the online mediation diva.
There we go. I feel like I should have a crown.
Well, I'll send you one. How about that?
Thank you.
Well, Susan, I'm so delighted to have you back on the show. It's been 2-3 years now, I think. And boy, has the world changed.
It's a good time to come back because yes, it was a very different world the last time we sat in these chairs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I do want to just share with our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background, because you truly are the epitome of transformation, because you have been known or are known as a top family lawyer and mediator in the country. You've won numerous accolades, and you've sat on numerous boards. I know you continue to be very, very active in the legal mediation world, and an educator. And so now I know that you helped form the Mostyn Guthrie Academy with Woody Mostyn, who's also been on this show and who's an esteemed and, again, one of the key thought leaders and professionals in the family mediation world. And you're training people like up the kazoo,
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. I have a cohort of trainees in the training room right now.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I do appreciate that. Yeah. But one of the things, Susan, that you are probably most known for in recent years is that you made the shift to online mediation long before most people even had an inkling of it in their mind's eye. And so you were ahead of the game, and you really were pivotal in the lives of so many mediators when the pandemic hit in 2020. And say a little bit more about your background and how you got started there.
Yeah, it was really happenstance for me, or maybe a lucky chance for me, when I had a very traditional family law practice and then a mediation practice, my own firm in Connecticut for 26 years. And just like many of your listeners probably had that kind of, I always call it a terrestrial practice, right? I had an office, I went to my office every day, I went to court. And then I moved cross country, and this is long before COVID hit. It's about 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. And when I moved cross country, suddenly it dawned on me, nobody over there knew who I was, knew what I did. And by the way, I wasn't licensed to practice law there yet. I had to take the bar exam. So it really quickly hit me that I needed to find a way to somehow work with people back on the East Coast, even though I was now located on the West Coast. So I remember going online and Googling this thing called video conferencing. I had heard about it, and I found a bunch of different, there was WebEx and a few others. And I'm like, well, how hard can it be? And just jumped on and started mediating cross country like that. And let me tell you, I made every mistake that you can possibly make. So I consider that the start of my training practice, because my training started as basically telling people what not to do based on what I had done wrong.
Well, what a wonderful foundation, learn from those who've been there,
Yes, you can learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I just delivered a class, and we talked about the phases of competency. At any given time, we are unconsciously incompetent because we simply don't know what we don't know. But then something happens, like for you moved across country. And so, what can I learn about this? We get better and better. So finally, we get to the phase of being unconsciously competent. And it comes so natural that we don't even have to think about it. But in our ever changing world, things change around us, and technology does too. And so I'd like to hear from you, Susan, then, as far as, from a mediator perspective, the ethical competency necessary in the virtual world, and how are we emerging in the new normal? We pivoted very quickly back in March of 2020, and I imagine a lot of us may think, I trained, I'm done there. I know what I need to know, but what's changing? Tell us your perspective.
Yeah, this is actually, I'm so glad you've asked this question, Deborah, because this is my real concern for us as professionals today. And that's both my lawyer colleagues and my mediator colleagues, my dispute resolution colleagues, is I do think that there's a large number of practitioners who made that shift now about 2 years ago. There was a real drive to get educated on, this new way of doing things. But now that we've gone 2 years into it, everyone's sort of settled into a place of complacency. Well, I know how to do it. I've been doing it now online. Therefore, I'm competent. And unfortunately, fortunately, technology has continued apace, I would call it, right? Technology and the providers and the creators and the innovators of our world have shifted their minds, their monies, their everything to saying, hey, we need more of this. And they're creating it, and the pipeline is wide open. So new things are coming all the time in technology, as well as we've had this massive amount of experience online. And as you and I know, you and I have done several programs together and a lot of, mutual learning experiences. We have learned a great deal about what happens in a virtual setting and in other settings, even in a mediation room. Even when you go back to in person, we have learned a great deal more about what we do. And so if you think you're competent because you learned something 2 years ago, you may find that the world has moved past you.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years, I can't, 2 years seems like a short period of time, but when we look at what's happened in the last 2 years, a lot of people go, what year was that? Or is it,
Yes.
I don't know.
When did COVID start?
Yeah, really. How long have we been dealing with this? Is like, oh, is this really 2022? It is really important. And I think, as I mentioned to you in our pre-show conversation about, I had my little setup here for working at home. And then because of my exposure to you and what you were, learning and teaching and so forth, it's like now I have this whole command center in front of me, and plus a second laptop. So,
Right.
I've got documents here and, to enhance the experience. And so, yeah, my microphone's up here and lights right there. And so, it is continuing to evolve and take a look at what we're doing. And so, what do you feel are the essence of being competent in a virtual world?
Yeah, and that's such a good point. Then again, so glad you asked it, because let me backtrack a bit to the fact that competency is a ethical requirement for practicing law or for being a mediator. So at its very core of what we do, the ethics of what we do, whether you are on the mediator side or the advocacy side, competencies are absolutely required. And so again, what does it mean to be competent? Somebody just asked me that question the other day, and I went, this little light bulb went off for me, because I talk about all the time about what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But this person said to me, but how do you know when you're there? How do you know when you are competent? And someone raised up, a colleague of ours, Colin Rule, has this quote about, if you go to a play and you are focusing on, what does he say? If you're focusing on the stage lighting, and that's what people walk out of the play talking about, then the odds are that either the play or the lighting was not a success, right? So if you're talking about the lighting when you saw a play, then something was wrong in that play, whether it was the lights were bad or the play was bad. And I think that's where you boil down that essence is, and you actually just said it in what you were saying just a moment ago. When you hit that level of unconscious competency, that's when you're at a level of competence, but at least conscious competency, right? That level below it. I know we all know that there are 4 levels. The one below it, if you are consciously competent, if you can go in and even have to think your way through everything, but are well aware of what could happen and are ready to deal with it and know how to manage the process and the differences of being online or being virtual, or what we're going to face is hybrid as we go forward, that's when you are competent. And when people leave your mediation, whether it's online or in person or hybrid, saying, that was a good mediation, rather than that was a good virtual mediation, or that's when I think you reach at least that level of conscious competency.
Yeah, that's so well put, Susan. In fact, I just did a mediation a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, with our known colleague, Carol Coleman. And we debriefed afterwards, and I said, you know what? That was fun. and we had a really great mediation. We reached resolution. And I said, that didn't even feel like work, and I guess at this point, I've been trying to get people to go virtually for a long time, but not under circumstances like you. But now with this, it's like, I'm so comfortable with the medium that it's like, I don't need to be in person. I mean, sure, being in person is nice, but that's saying we can accomplish so much. And so it is that level of, I guess, comfort, so to speak. And as you said, competency is part of our ethical requirements to be good at what we do. And so I have a saying called, it's important that we always learn, live it, apply it, and then continue to grow, because life keeps changing.
Well, and the key part of that is the continuing to grow.
Yeah.
And that's where I think people right now, where we are in danger as a profession a little bit, is that people really stepped up 2 years ago when COVID hit. I mean, I've trained over 21,000 professionals since COVID hit. And I only say that to say that was, that's a lot of people who reached out and wanted to know, how to do this. They wanted to do it well. They dove in, they practiced, they've spent time in our other programs, and are really trying to learn. But when you stop at that point and the world continues, and the technology upgrades and more technology comes, and the psychology of what we do online, in person, or in a hybrid setting continues to change and evolve, and what we know about it and how to tweak it and make it better. If you've stopped learning, then you are probably edging back down into the incompetent range.
Yeah, well, but and I was just going to acknowledge how many people you've trained. And before I forget, just for our viewers and listeners, is that Colin Rule will be coming on the show in a couple, 2-3 more episodes. So I'm excited to have him on board. But just stepping back for a second, as you reflect on how things have changed over the last couple of years, and even where you were in your earlier days of being online, what would you say was the biggest challenge for people going, mediators, attorneys going online to deliver the services that they deliver?
Yeah. So I really think that in the beginning, there was a great deal of fear. I'm going to, which is extremely common. We're human, and we were faced with a massive shift in how we did things. And you just mentioned, you just did a virtual mediation with Harold, and it was fun and it was seamless, and it really wasn't a part of the process, the fact that it was virtual. It was just that you were going through a dispute resolution process. But remember back to 2 years ago, the idea of opening up a laptop, flipping on the camera, and speaking into a screen was utterly foreign to most of our colleagues. And so in those days, I give everyone a huge amount of credit, pat everyone on the back. Exactly. Golf clap. But I mean it. That people really did step up and dive into it to learn. But it's interesting because you and I were talking in the pre-program discussion. When I think back to what I trained people on in those early days, it was very much how to use Zoom. I mean, there were definitely ethical components and how to manage, confidentiality in certain issues, but a lot of the training was, here's how you set up an account. Here's why you need a good camera, things that frankly, I think most practitioners are well beyond now. And I don't teach those things in my trainings anymore. I do a few basic trainings a year because there are still people who want that, but even that training is vastly different. But you and I both know, and I've learned much of what I know now and teach from you, because I always give you credit when I speak. My trainees and my, people who hear me speak at events, I always, my colleague and friend, Dr. Dupree, because, you bring that psychological and neuroscience aspect to the table. And that is a huge part of what we do that got lost, I think, in the early days of COVID when we were so focused on this technology. And now that we have had a chance to take a deep breath, get comfortable with the technology, we should be opening our minds to the psychology.
Thank you for your accolades. I do appreciate it very much, Susan. And, so given on that note, then, is that how do you see professionals changing, since 2 years ago to where they are now? Where are they still challenged? What ethical concerns do you have about how they practice mediation, not only in a virtual world, but a hybrid world? Because I deal a lot with workplace issues. And so I know that's a huge challenge for organizational leaders about, demanding that people come back on site, say, really, do we really need to go there? And there's all kinds of factors around that. But back to mediation, what do you see being some of the changes as well as the challenges that people still face?
Yes. So, I feel like we're on the edge of big change again. And what's happening for people right now, and the main reason why 2 years ago, I think we were so successful in the major switch to online, is frankly, no one had a choice, right? You had to go online or you weren't going to practice. Now, as we emerge from the pandemic, where social distancing is no longer as much an issue, hopefully, as we go forward, there is a choice now, or there's a perception of choice. And, one thing, and it is maybe a psychological factor. I feel that people are losing sight of the fact that technology is an aid. It's not an all or nothing, one way or the other. Yet I hear that so often from colleagues that, I'm going back to in person and I am never using technology again. I don't like virtual. Or I hear from colleagues, and frankly, I'm one of them, who, because of many of the benefits of a virtual practice, I plan and have stayed online for a number of years now. And I think it's not an either or. I think we need to look at and consider the technologies that we use as additional tools that we can use to make the mediation experience and process better for our clients and, frankly, for ourselves. What you said earlier just, makes my heart sing about a mediation that was virtual, that wasn't even an issue. The fact that it was virtual, it was just a mediation. And I think so. One of the things that I think we're going to be battling for a bit here until people settle down is this perception that it's one or the other. I think you can offer both.
Yeah,
frankly.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I know I've been spending time recently, modifying my materials, my website and so forth, that, I'm delivering virtually, on-site mediation or training is available only upon request. And then I have to consider the factors involved, and so totally a different shift from what it used to be. But I know with my primary clientele, they really like the Zoom thing. It's easier to schedule. It's easier to bring everybody together. There's not travel from different sites. And it's like, why wouldn't you go there, And yet there have been times when an in-person one seemed to be the best suited. And we've done that, but that's by far not the norm anymore. It's all virtual. But then again, the hybrid, what do you, that's a whole nother ballgame. So talk about that.
Yeah, and that is, I think, our next frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And another potential problem as we go forward, if people do not up their competencies, I guess I would say, to stay in keeping with what we're talking about here. What I have been running across a great deal among colleagues is this idea that if I know how to do a virtual mediation, I can just do a hybrid mediation. And I should clarify, by hybrid mediation, I mean where some of the participants are in the same room together and other participants are beaming in virtually, I'll call it. I know that means different things to different people. Somebody told me, well, doesn't that mean mediation, arbitration, or meet-arb? And I'm like, oh, no, different world. I'm talking tech. But I have heard repeatedly from colleagues, many colleagues, that, oh, I've done a couple of hybrids, or I did a hybrid. It was a disaster. And it turned into a disaster because they walked into the mediation room with a laptop and thought that they were going to, well, this is how I do my mediations online. So what more do I need? And they didn't put the thought and the time into properly preparing for a hybrid mediation. And a hybrid mediation is more complicated than an in-person and more complicated than an online or virtual mediation. It has elements of both. And you and I have talked about in presentations, that is both the technology that's needed, as well as the psychology of dealing with the fact that you now have some people who are sitting right there with you and other participants who are on a screen far away. And if you don't put thought into that, and not just thought and preparation, but specifically to the psychological aspects, how are you going to deal with that? Have a plan, folks. Then you, again, risk falling down into that conscious incompetence, or even worse, unconscious incompetence, which I think is happening.
Yeah. Those are really good points, Susan. And like you said earlier, is that, a lot of your early training was based on what, the mistakes you made and what not to
Yes.
do. And I have to, acknowledge that, basically, I had the same situation of where I would have, unbeknownst to me at the time, I learned to ask the right questions now, but where I had participants, at a particular public agency that were all lined up along a long conference, table. They all were wearing masks, and then the camera was at the very end. And so it was really hard to see everybody with the mask on. I couldn't, it was hard to understand. The audio was not that great. And, and so where I'm going with that then is that I did some research. Well, what's happening now that we're moving into this hybrid kind of world? And so, what's happening in the business world is that, people are rearranging their conference rooms. And so instead of having these long tables, they're having modular tables that can be moved around. The screens are going to the side walls. So you can have multiple screens to connect with everybody. Technology is out there now with where, everybody has a place on the screen. So the distinction between who's in the room versus who's remote is decreased,
minimized. Sure.
Yeah, minimized. And then we've talked about the owl, the camera that follows directional audio and visual. And so I've given those recommendations out to a lot of my public agency customers, because I even just did one last week where they were all in person, but they didn't have the proper video, and so they had to keep shifting the laptop around to show who was speaking, because otherwise, like, who's out there? And so lessons learned. It's like, okay, yes, continue to ask more questions. How are we setting up on this? And for others, it's more evident. And but again, that's another area of competency that I have to bring to the table to deal with people, making sure people feel included. And so I guess when a question I have for you, Susan, is that, when you think about, the shift to the virtual world and then even the hybrid world, how do you see, this more virtual medium, powerful or not, when it comes to dealing with people in conflict? Because after all, our show is called Decoding the Conflict Mindset. And so what do you see being the pluses and what do you see being the minuses when it comes to actually dealing with people in conflict?
Well, I have to say, and I do think there are pluses or minuses, right? I think it's actually very important to acknowledge, as much of a fan as I am clearly of virtual practice, I will acknowledge that there are downsides to it. I think there's a balance. And as long as clients are properly informed, so they can make an informed decision, then it's really up to a client which process they would like to choose. The benefits are vast, I really think, of being able to be online. And they definitely go to that element of diffusing conflict. That ability to be physically safe from that conflict also creates, I think, an emotional sense or greater sense of safety as well, that will extend to people being able to have a richer conversation that they might not be able to have 6 inches away from each other across a conference table. And you and I have both seen cases where somebody's dog is sitting next to them, or a support person. Those instances, I do divorce work. So, I am always dealing with people who are in high levels of conflict and trauma. And so I definitely think, I do domestic violence cases, things that I would never have been able to do in person. But the flip side of that, putting aside, a domestic violence case, but a case where we have, say, 2 parents in conflict, but their conflicts lessened because they are through a screen as opposed to sitting in the same room. A colleague pointed out to me that they somewhat lose the opportunity to learn in the mediation process how to better communicate and manage a higher level of conflict because they're not experiencing a higher level of conflict. And I actually think that's a valid point. I think it should be weighed against the ability of them to actually reach agreement and work through conflict, which hopefully will have some additional benefits that, will counteract that. But there will always be pros and cons to this. Those pros and cons get bigger and need to be considered, and certainly people need to be educated about them when they say they want to do a hybrid process. And that's where I think we need to start with our clients, and it starts with us being aware. Most people would choose to do a virtual or beam into an in-person proceeding virtually because of distance, time, money, right? Convenience issues. That's going to be the main reason why most people are going to want to do it. But are they aware of a psychological tendency that might be created of us versus them, the in-persons versus the remotes, the feeling of being marginalized because they're not in the room with the mediator? Are they thinking that when they think, yeah, I don't want to get in LA traffic to go sit in that office? No. And it's the mediator's job to make them aware of that, so they make an informed decision about that hybrid process. And that's just one example, but I think it's one of the very first things we should be thinking of. Yet I know very few mediators who are giving clients that kind of understanding and education.
Well, you made some really great points there. And one of the things, going back to, the consumers of mediation services now recognize they have a choice, and they have to assess their own comfort level, or what I call psychological safety. You referred to as emotional safety. And there's a lot of value and benefits to someone being in their own home. And I know we've used a photo of a woman online with a dog behind her back, and there's a sense of comfort there. And, we all get a little anxious or angst, when we're going to someplace new and maybe a proceeding we've never been in, or meeting people we don't know. And then to see the person we're in conflict with, I know you and I have talked about before, we feel the heat of somebody's emotional intensity in person. And that's why I remember early on, we kept getting so many anecdotes from people that our mediations are actually going faster. We're actually reaching more resolution. And it's like, I think it's because we don't have that physical heat or the psychological heat of the moment of the two people in conflict, that it's a little easier to manage. But one of the things that I've noticed too is that, for mediators, in many respects, we have to be even more alert and attuned to what's going on, not only managing our technology, but if we're busy writing or looking away at something, real easy to miss the facial expressions and the change in someone's emotional expression. Because just the other day, we'd been talking about something, and as we were talking about it, she had sunglasses on because she was outside, but it was like, and my other party was there, but it's like, I see some emotion came up there, because you could see the change in the facial tension, and so it's really important, I think, for mediators to move forward as part of their competency, is to do a study of human behavior, and particularly facial expressions. And quite frankly, I know from my perspective, I'd rather be online rather than in person while we still have masks, because you can't read all of the facial expressions and really see what's going on, and then you're really trying to pay attention.
Yeah, so true. And there's so much to the what we need to be thinking about. One thing that you taught me, and it actually came up in my training the other day, we're training some brand new mediators in a 40-hour. And one of the things I, like you, work off of several screens, and I was taking notes and I was turned to the side. But before I turned to take the notes, I said to the room, because I've heard from Dr. Deborah Dupree, I just want to make everyone aware, that I'm working off of a second laptop. So if I'm turned to the side, I'm taking notes. Please, know that I'm listening intently to what you're saying. And when we went into a role play, I saw some of my baby mediators using that, and I was so proud, so proud.
Yeah.
But they also, when we debriefed those role plays, every single person that was in those rooms said, that made me feel so much better. It made me feel secure that my mediator knew what was going on, understood the nuance. That was the word that kept getting used. The nuances, the emotional and psychological nuances of this platform and this medium. And that's where many mediators who think that virtual mediation is just knowing how to Zoom are again, perhaps diving down into that realm of conscious or unconscious incompetence.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled to hear that. So, it's about transparency. It's about, being aware of your surroundings. And after all, 55% of our communication is through our behavior that's seen. And so people think you're over here, it's like, where did she go? Am I watching
She's
TV
doing her
over
nails
there?
over there.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. A little Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Susan, I mean, this has been a great discussion. So as we wrap up in our final moments, what are some recommendations you have? What are some exciting trainings or speaking opportunities you've got coming up, so people know where they can access you more and learn more from you?
Oh, thank you. The best place to get more training, and that is one of the very important things that, I think I'm not talking just about online or virtual mediation or hybrid. I think if you are a mediator, a dispute resolution professional, an attorney, there's a reason why we have requirements for continuing education, because you can be competent in this moment, as we've talked about, but that does not mean that 6 months from now you're still competent, because the world changes and it's changing at rapid speed for us right now. So get out there. I learn more from in the trainings where I'm the trainer, from trainees, or when I do a speaking engagement with someone like you and colleagues. I learn doing those things. I take other trainings. I just took Bill Eddy's high conflict training and learned a wealth of new things. So I highly recommend, taking more trainings. Get yourself into a consulting group of professionals. It's wonderful to have a place to go where you hear that little golden nugget of, hey, if you're working off another screen, I always make sure I tell my clients that I'm turning to look on another screen. Those little things just come out in conversations with other colleagues. So those are some of the things we offer at Most & Guthrie. If anybody's interested, you can find out more about them at mostandguthrie.com. I am doing an advanced issues in online mediation training in May. And it's just 3.5 hours, but I'm really going to try and up level everybody's conscious competence. And I'd love to get y'all to unconscious competence, but I'm going to get you over the line at least. You and I have an encore of our AAA advanced mediation and advocacy training that's coming up. And I think I'm doing an ethics panel for CPR just next week. So that's probably, sorry, cut that out.
Okay, well, a lot of great opportunities come in. That's one of the things too that I would say about the virtual world. It's made training so much more accessible than what it has been, because I know that there are many programs I passed on because of the time and travel, the cost, and to one thing to take the class, but then the time and travel was a whole other thing, and then the cost of lodging and so forth. So access to training to me, I feel, has just been so enhanced by by the virtual world. And I know I'm always signing up for webinars, and even if I can't actually attend, I get the recordings, and I'm always listening and learning. I probably feel like I do more research and studying than I ever did before, because the world is changing so rapidly. And like you said, I learn just as much from teaching as I do attending, because I have to research and get ready and make sure I am current on everything. So yeah, so excellent suggestions, Susan. And so one final thing is that if there's one thing that you would hope that practitioners would get out of this, what would that be?
I would hope that they would get that our world as practitioners is forever changed. There's no going back to a pre-COVID practice or world. And this is a good thing. I know that COVID has been a horrible experience for most people, but the changes and the advantages that have been brought with more technology benefit us all, and ultimately help us benefit our clients. And we are a service industry, whether we're lawyers, whether we're mediators, we're here to provide services and help people resolve their conflicts. As my business partner says, Woody Moston, the world needs more peacemakers, and we have more tools to help bring peace because of the technology. Just make sure that you know and are competent to use it.
Well, that's all part of building trust.
It sure is.
Yeah. Well, Susan, thank you so much for bringing your pearls of wisdom to decoding the conflict mindset and advancing the role of mediation in the lives of people who are in conflict. And so thank you again, Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, pass it on, move it forward. That's how we keep moving forward and bring peace to every conversation into the lives of people across the world. And we sure do need that right now.
We sure do.
Okay. Thank you again. We'll talk to you soon. Listen up for our next episode so you won't miss out on our next learning opportunity. Wasn't Susan Guthrie absolutely phenomenal? Always brings such keen insights and historical perspective about how to use online mediation effectively, artfully, and skillfully. Truly the diva of online mediation. Well, we're going to continue our journey. One of the things that I love about being the host of the Decoding the Conflict Mindset are the wonderful, intelligent, insightful, smart people I get to meet, and all with the intention of bringing to you their powerful message. This time we're going to take a turn a little bit into the work world, leadership world. Actually, leaders at every level of leadership, wherever they show up. And this applies to our dispute resolution enthusiasts who may be mediators as well, because after all, we are the leaders of the mediation process. But today I have Mitch Gray, and Mitch Gray does come to us with a very interesting background, anywhere from seminary to high fashion retail, and then now doing what he does today, the host of his Mitch Gray Show. In fact, that's where we first met. So listen and learn and found out how that really evolved. But one of the things that I love about Mitch's message is that he talks about the spirit, the spirituality, and the power of that spirit and spirituality in leadership today. And he combines those notions into terms of how we can truly make employees feel empowered and drive our organizations to higher success. So stay tuned, don't go away. You've got to listen to what Mitch has to say. Dr. Deborah Dupree, The Conflict Mindset.